Welcome. Hi, I'm Dawn with K-Square Technologies. Welcome to our monthly training series. Today's session is on building presentation success with PowerPoint. That is, how can we build presentations that will more successfully communicate our key messages? I want you to take a moment to think about the PowerPoint presentations you've seen recently. That is, did they keep your attention? Were they easy to see? Were the visuals relevant and compelling? Think about this question. If you were king or queen of the world, PowerPoint presenters would stop doing what? That is, in chat, share what is it that will take your attention away from their communication, from that presentation. What are some of the things that you see? One of my colleagues, Dave Perotti, he does a biannual survey of his contacts, and we consistently see the same answers. That is, visuals are too complex. We're trying to pack too much information on one slide. The text is too small to read. So even in a virtual environment, this is something you need to be aware of because people might be connecting virtually on their phones or their iPads. And so we can't just say that, oh, because the screen is so close that we can put more content in there. Full sentences for text. And consistently, this has been what comes up in years of training on PowerPoint. The speaker reads the slides to us. Now, why do they do that? Lots of times it's because they're not professional presenters. They might be an expert in their industry. They might know quite a bit about their business, but presenting in front of an audience, whether it's 2 or 200 or 2,000, is not something that they might do on a regular basis. But there are other tools that can help you with this. And these include things like speaker notes. That is, it's a mistake to think that you need to memorize your presentation. Instead, you can have reference notes so that so you're putting up the key points, but not everything that you want to say, because otherwise your audience is going to check out. So too often we see long, boring, confusing, bad slides. The text is too small. We can't read it. Long paragraphs instead of bullets. Overly complex diagrams and charts and poor choices of colors, so we don't have good color contrast. And our audiences become disengaged, frustrated, confused. When slides look like this, and this is actually from a real live PowerPoint presentation, our audiences will often completely check out. So what do we want to see? We want to see presentations that are simple, legible, engaging, and visually appealing. And one of the keys to this is something that is typically missed in creating a presentation, and that is to have a plan. There's a lot of different ways to plan a presentation. I'll cover some of these briefly. But unfortunately, most people will simply go to PowerPoint, fire it up, maybe open up an old presentation and save it under a new name, and simply start adding slides or updating that without really having a cohesive plan. Now you think about anything that you do in business, you likely have a plan. What you need to know, for instance, what are the different elements of it, how much it might cost, what are some of the different key people that need to be involved in it? Those are all things that we do before we move forward with important projects. And so that's also what you should consider when comes time to your next presentation. So devoting time to planning is actually going to save you time, because you're focusing your attention on the most important elements. So as we look at this and as we move forward in our time together, this is one of the 4 key presentation pieces. The first being to have a plan, and everything else falls into place once you start looking at what are the things that you want to accomplish with that. And then sometimes we come back and we have to revise that. Then we go to preparation. So this is typically where most PowerPoint presenters spend all of their time on the preparation. I'm not saying that you shouldn't spend a good deal of time of putting together effective presentations, but the plan will help drive where you should spend your time, what kind of content will be part of that. And then practice. So often this is completely skipped. This is something that is completely ignored as part of this process. And then we get to the presentation part. That is, if you've spent time on the practice, now you'll be a little bit more comfortable with that presentation part. Now, anywhere along the line, we might have to go back and revisit that plan and maybe might make modifications. You might have been told that you had 20 minutes and now you only have 10 minutes. So the structure of your presentation will help you as well. And we'll look at that as we continue. Part of this plan is to make sure that you're clear about your goal, your vision, what's your message. When you're done, do you want to have people in the audience sign up to have an appointment with you? Do you want them to, is this to inform your staff about upcoming changes? That is, what is the goal? And that will also help you to focus in on the key elements of that presentation. That is, what is it you really want to accomplish? Is it to inform, educate, inspire, entertain, persuade, sell? There's so many different nuances to this, but keeping this in mind will also help you to really have a much more focused presentation. It's also good to know that when you are done, what's your call to action? What do you want them to do? And so all of these are elements of this plan. Now, it's also helpful to have a way to organize your content. There's not just one way, but what makes sense for you? It could be using Post-it notes or stickies, something where you can kind of look at that. That is, we want to make sure that we don't have 10 key points. 3 to 5 key points. And it's the shorter presentation, we need to narrow that down. And then what are the stories that would go in under those? What are the elements, the graphics that you have, the examples, the data? What would go into that? You might want to be a little bit more free form, with a flow chart or a mind map. You might be working off a whiteboard. That is, it isn't that there's one specific way. And you could organize it as well on your computer, although I encourage you to take some time before you launch into developing your presentation to really look at these elements. That is, in PowerPoint, as with a lot of other things, if we build in structure, we actually have more flexibility. And it also is helpful for those in your audience that really want to know what's coming up, what are we talking about, what's the point, why am I here? And so to have that structure means that if we're running out of time, or maybe we had some great questions that took longer than we had planned, now we could jump forward without having it be completely confusing. So we'll look at some shortcuts for working within the delivery of a presentation. But as an example, if I wanted to go back to that image with a very confused woman. If I know what that slide number is, I could type that in. So that is 10, I hit enter, there she is. Now, if I want to come back to the slide, I type in the slide number again and hit enter. This gives you the ability to jump around without having to just keep flipping forward or flipping backwards or escaping, which is even worse, out of your presentation. And so the more we build structure, the easier it is to have the flexibility within our presentation. So where are we heading? Continue looking at planning and organizing. I'll share with you the #1 tip and feature in PowerPoint that you should know and start working with to really get power from PowerPoint. What are some tips for better bullet slides? That is, some people have a philosophy that you shouldn't have any bullet slides. It should just be primarily images, and that is, I think, a little idealistic to what we might typically look with different kinds of business presentations. How can we add more interest through the use of smart art? And what are some slideshow presentation shortcuts that could help to elevate your presentation game and success? Now, certainly preparation, a key part to that. And with that, then we're going to look at one of the first things that you want to accomplish with that. I do want to mention that this is an example of a section slide. So it's a little different than our title slides. The section slides visually convey, oh, we're on to another thought or main point. And so this kind of reinforces those 4 main points. So a section slide is a type of slide that's available in PowerPoint. And it is something to consider as part of planning that out. So to be able to have that flexibility and to also show more organization. Now, have you worked with the Slide Master before? Is that a tool that you've used? The Slide Master is the blueprint of your presentation. However, most people aren't familiar with it and haven't used it. And so what this can lead to is that we have disconnected slides. We have slides that don't look like they're all part of the same presentation, different size fonts, different colors, things like that. So the Slide Master is the foundation of every single presentation. We might even have more than one Slide Master within that, but it's a really helpful tool to know. And so let's go ahead and look at how that Slide Master can be useful for you, because it actually communicates to PowerPoint, to your presentation, what the text looks like, what the graphics look like, what's the layout, the background, and all of that. So we're going to hop into PowerPoint. And here we have this is a relatively simple presentation. And it was built off of one of the PowerPoint templates. That is, you can go into File and New and build from existing presentations. And so that can be one way to get a good start of something that might look very visually appealing. And you can see then we have different kinds of content. It actually has the same kind of color scheme. That's part of what comes from those presentations. We can see more of that in under design, where we can have these various themes. All of these are things that are part of the Slide Master. Now, even when it's time to go to and create a new slide, for instance, if we look at that under New Slide, here are different layouts for these slides, and these are also coming from the Slide Master. So know that these are all connected. But as we continue, let's just say one of the things that happens is maybe we want to have this heading, maybe make it bold, I'll make it a different color, and maybe I'll make it larger. When we do manual formatting like that, that overrides the slide master. So the slide master was saying, okay, this is how our titles look. But when we manually format it, now we're changing that. And so that also means that if you wanted to, what most people do is they'll go into every single slide and change those headings, because manual formatting will override the slide master. But if we go to the slide master, we can change it in one place, and then it feeds forward to all the other slides. We can also have slides like this that maybe our colleague created, and we're like, oh no, you know, we weren't supposed to let him touch that presentation. So this is also one of the challenges that we can have. That is, it can be a lot of inconsistency with that. Or even something like this that is, although it might look, you know, fairly nice, now we have a title that's a different font, it's centered, we have different bullet styles. And so that also creates a disconnect for your audience. So where's that slide master? Now, we find that under the View tab. And over to the left-hand side, you'll see some of our various views that are available to us. For instance, the slide sorter. So that becomes one of our options. But here is Slide Master. Now, if you have worked with PowerPoint handouts and notes, then you'll see that there are masters for those as well. But let's go ahead and focus on that Slide Master piece. So in this case, then, what we see here is our main slide. This is basically feeding forward to all those other slides. And then there are different layouts here. Notice as I hover over this, it says title slide layout. So this is the layout that is currently used by the first slide. And this is the name of that layout. Here's my title and content. Here's a section header layout. So I'm going to talk before about section slides. So in this case, what if I wanted to change this title? Well, I'm changing it now for the entire presentation rather than individually going in. So we don't want to put custom format that is something that's specific to one kind of slide. It's for the presentation itself. And in this case, I'll go ahead and I'm just making that bold, and I change that to green. So that's one of the things that we have there as well. Now, notice how that has fed forward to these other layouts. So there's a lot of layouts here that you probably wouldn't use, and you can actually delete them if you want to. But what's happening is that this slide master then is going to tell those other slides how to look if you create a brand new one, and it will communicate as best as it can to those existing slides as well. And so we'll see that. Now there's some other things that we can also change here as well. For instance, we have a header and a footer that we can modify. So here we have header and footer, and that's under Insert. And so, for instance, I might want to display the slide number on every slide. Right now, it has a placeholder that's currently sitting here in the bottom right-hand corner. And I could format that as well. You could add the date and time. I tend to advise against this. It updates automatically. That is it. So if you want to go back to the presentation that might have happened earlier this year or last year, then it will just reflect the current date. But we can use this as kind of a fixed piece as well. And I could also add the footer. And what would happen there is that this is where I can put in repetitive text. And so if this is whatever my topic might be for that, I could put that in as well. You don't have to have that. And I'll also say, don't show this on the title slide. So that becomes another piece there too. So these are some additional things, and you can see here, I could apply it just to this one, or I could apply to all. And now let's come back here. I have my slide number, and I'm going to change the formatting of that a little bit. I could right click on this, or I will, because we've got so many different elements going on here. Let's see if I can get to that. Oh, now it's going to be a little stubborn. Okay. Let me go ahead and see if I can get to it from another place. There we go. So that is another piece, although it isn't something I have to change right now, that we could also change. So slide number just makes it easier for you just to know what slide you're on, but you could also print out a handout that would give you that information. Now, additionally, we might want to put in our company logo, or there might be other things that we could add to these layouts. So for instance, here I could put in this logo, and I might decide that I want to have this in the corner, or maybe I want to have it down at the bottom, or you might not have it at all. That is, you'll see that we already have those elements here that are part of that slide master. So these are some of the things to consider if it's helpful, and we'll kind of see the idea of how we might work with these graphics or not. That is, but that's another element that then is communicated and moved forward to the other slides. Let's go ahead and see what happens here. I'm going to close the slide master. Now you can go back to that anytime. And here's our first few slides. Okay, so here's our title slide. We changed the color of the font. Here we have our a chart. Now we might decide, maybe I'll take that logo out. That's okay. I can go back into the slide master and take that out. But remember that slide where we changed the color? That was manual formatting. That overrides the slide master. So I'll share with you how we could fix that. And this one is just a mess. So remember all that manual formatting, that's a problem. But all of these other slides are carrying forward that change. And this not only creates, saves you time, but it also gives you that consistency. So, and for something like, let's just say I'm going to keep that logo, although I probably would take that out. I'm going to go ahead here, and if it looks a little busy, one of the things we can do under design here, under the design tab, I'm going to go to format background, and just for this one slide, because I already have a chart and there's a lot going on, I'm going to hide the background graphics. And so now just for this one chart, we now have something that's a little bit simpler, a little bit more streamlined. And so that noted, that's another option as you explore then how to work with it. But how do we fix these slides that are just a mess? That is where we've had manual formatting. In the Home tab, there is a feature that is called Reset. So I can simply go to that slide. I want to make sure that the slide master reflects my preferences, and I'm going to reset. It's that easy. I can also come to this next slide here, right click on it, and here is Reset. And it looks so much better. Now, when you do the reset, it might reset, depends upon how that slide was originally created. You might sometimes just have to recreate it. It might not make sense. But let's go back to that when we said, here I'm in Home and I want to create a new slide. Each one of these slides are going to convey then our preferences within that slide master. So once again, here I have another one, can right click and reset. So that's the value and magic of the slide master. And hopefully that gives you some ideas of how you can create more effective and successful presentations by simply changing your preferences. What are some other things that would be helpful for you to know? One is that we want to be careful about the fonts that we use. We want to keep our text readable. And so we want to forget fancy fonts, that is anything that's harder to read. And ideally, although you'll see PowerPoint presentations that don't have these, ideally, what we want to do is we want to have a presentations that don't have the serif fonts. They have what's called sans serif, without serif. So serifs have those little hands and feet, and those are great for documentation. But if we want to have something that's clearer and easier to read, stick with sans serif. And these are things like Calibri, Arial, those types of fonts, Tahoma. Those are all fonts that will be a bit easier to read. Additionally, it can be very tempting to capitalize. That is, this is an old habit that we say, well, if we capitalize, it'll stand out, but it's actually harder to read. So we recognize words by the shapes of the words, by the letters in the words. And so when we capitalize, then it's harder, it takes longer to read that compared to the same paragraph of text below. So that's one of the things to consider, is to not have capitalization in your titles. You might have it for some small labels, but other than that, it's good to change how you approach the text. And just because you can fit things into a slide, please don't. That is, split it into multiple slides. Where can you use a visual? We don't want to have more than a few text slides in a row. And so this is painful in that, first of all, it's not readable. We have way too much content. Even if people were interested in our topic, they're going to read ahead, and now they're, checking their email on their phone. So that's not a helpful thing as well. So be watchful of that too. Let's look at 10 tips for better bullets. First of all, mention the caps. Avoid all caps, just as you would want to have those in email as well. Phrases, not sentences. Leverage the speaker notes. It's absolutely fine to be able to say, oh, to grab some notes or have those in front of you. You're not a motivational speaker presenting to thousands of people that is sharing a speech that they have given hundreds of thousands of times. It may be a one-time presentation. It's okay to have notes for that. Less than 3 to 4 text slides in a row. How can we bring in visuals? Our audiences are so visual. It doesn't matter what the generation is anymore. Our audience are so visual. How can we make those more appealing? Maximum of 2 lines per bullet. This gets back to phrases, not sentences. And the correct use of numbered lists. Now, this is a little bit more subtle, but think about what happens when you see 1, 2, 3, for instance, in a slide or anywhere. That will assume order. It will assume step by step. It assumes that those are items that must be in that order. If that's not the case, use bullets and not numbered lists. So even if you say there's 3 important things to know about X, if you could mix those up, if you don't need to know it in that sequence, change it up. And review your presentations for simplicity. This not only could have been split into really 5 or 6 or more slides, it would have been much more interesting. And where are the visuals? Where are the images? They're talking about different locations, different studies and milestones. There's so much that could be added to this. And it's just became really confusing more than anything else. So 5 more tips. Solid bullets are best. They're readable, so there's some decorative choices, and let's stay away from those. Eliminate underlined text. What does this mean? Well, if we look at underlined text, here again, we're thinking, oh, well, that'll help it stand out. So whether it's all caps or underlined or something like that, pick a different color, pick a different size. And because underlined implies a hyperlink, it implies something that's a clickable link, let's say to a website or an email. And if you're just underlining it to emphasize it, then you might make it bold or a different color rather than underlining it. And although italics text can certainly be used, it should be for emphasis and not be something that you use throughout an entire presentation. a minimum font size. I'd even go bigger than that, but 18 point, 24 point, that's a minimum. And so use that to watch out for that. Should really have no more than 4 to 6 bullet slides per slide, and titles, text. These are some good guidelines for you to keep in mind so that you have more readable, more compelling slides to look at. So all of these will help you to have more effective presentations. Now, if you are also preparing for any kind of virtual presentation, some of these things all apply. There's a few more things you want to consider. More slides, that is, we want to have more variety, moving through that more quickly, less content per slide. And these rules will apply for an in-person presentation too. Widescreen format, that's the default in PowerPoint. You may have old presentations that are the 4:3, more of the square format. Well, think about all the monitors we have, the TVs we have, the devices we have, they are widescreen. And that's what we should be presenting for, even if it's on an old projector. Large readable text, a visual change every 30 to 60 minutes, 30 to 60 seconds, and build in frequent interaction. So those are some other things to keep in mind too. Too often, whether we attend a conference or we're in, just at a local meeting, we see presentations like this. Now, first of all, Excel spreadsheets have no business being in a PowerPoint presentation. If it's an important resource in your resource, then share that as a handout or share it as a link or something that those people who are interested could download it or access it. This is not even readable to the person who's presenting it. And so it's just painful to see. But this happens in real life. And it's important to say, or as a presenter, you should never be saying, I don't know if you can read this. If you don't know if they can read it, just assume they can't and fix the presentation, fix the slides. So this is actually a simpler version of that example, but it can be really hard to know, like, what's the point? What are we trying to share here? Now, if we're responsible for the cookie division, then that might be all that we show. Or how can we present it in a way for the people that don't necessarily need to know all the details? How about a chart? That certainly would make it simpler to quickly summarize the information and make it more visual. Charts are easy to create in PowerPoint. They use the same tools that Excel uses. So that's another consideration. Or how could we make it even more visual? You have to keep in mind, we have access to lots of different images. They should all be things that you have paid the rights to use that are royalty-free, ideally pictures that you've taken yourself. And know that PowerPoint now also has, if you go into insert in pictures, there is now also a stock images piece. So these are free for you to use as well. And so that is a really great tool that's going to be expanded over time. How about making this cookie data even more visual? So I realize you're not probably marketing, selling, promoting, or sharing information on cookies, but what could you do to help make your presentations more effective, more useful? So this is just one of the things to consider. Let's talk a little bit more about graphics and some of the options that are available for you. So even if we have a chart in PowerPoint, this is certainly clean. We don't have a lot of extra elements to that. We have the grid turned off. There's a lot of different things that are really useful about this. But what if we added animation? So in PowerPoint, we can animate each of those. So then now you, as the presenter, you have control over the delivery of that. People aren't reading ahead. That is, the things you do as a audience member, that's what you have to plan for. So I can control the delivery of this by applying animation to that. Certainly let us know through chat and the Q&A if you have any questions about some of the things you've seen. But it's not just about creating better graphics, it's which graphics you pick. So we can say, oh, look at that. My girlfriend just got a new golden retriever puppy, so that's very relevant. But which one do you like better, this or this? I think I know the answer. Photos create more of an emotional response. And they are, clip art is something we need to stay away from. It might have made sense 20 years ago in PowerPoint, not anymore. Too often we still see these cutesy kind of clip art, cartoony things, and there might be a place for some of those. But what if we actually had an image for that? That might make a lot more sense. Now, there's some times when we want to have graphics versus photos. So we still want, but these graphics should be high quality. If you have a concept, for instance, like brain science or diversity, it might be a lot easier to have a concept rather than trying to show an actual picture for that. If it's a technical concept, here again, some sort of a concept can also make that easier, more visual. And we may actually want to minimize the emotional response to it. And so it's not to say that everything should be photos, but what would be available for you there. Let's look at one way for you to easily, that is, this afternoon, you could go in and improve your presentations with just this one piece, and that is smart art. So those are my, remember those 4 key presentation ideas? Now they're numbered because it is a sequence for that. But we saw how we could just change the look of that. It still shows this process, but it's certainly more visual. Same idea here. Here's a planning cycle. Or through the use of smart art, we can make that much more visual as well. So how do we do this? What does this look like? Let's come back and look. And for smart art, for instance, here's this idea. Just 2 very simple things. And to create smart art, I can go ahead and choose Insert, Smart Art, and explore these. So if you have multiple bullet items, multiple items, whether they're part of a process or a list, maybe it is a list. Explore some of these options or a process. So this might be one of the other items. So here's the one, for instance, that I shared with you, for the plan, prepare, present, practice and present. So if I pick this, now what we're going to see here is then the basics for this. You don't need to know then how to be an artist or to draw those squares or those circles. Over here on the left-hand side, I have this little arrow. And I can click on that to open it up, or we could click into this as well. Additionally, under the Smart Art Design tab, when we're in there, that's the text pane. So that's what I'm looking at right now. So I'm going to go ahead here and click, and you can, I'll just use that idea here of the plan, prepare, practice, and present. Now, I'm going to delete the others and I'll click away. Now I could close this or click away, and I need to size this a little bit. We can move it around if that made sense. But once you have that smart art, then explore some of the smart art design options. I could change my layout here if I wanted to change that, for instance, to a basic process, or something else might make more sense. And we could change the colors, even change the style. What does that look like? So notice here with a couple clicks, we're creating a more interesting way to present. If I wanted to actually add animation to that, I simply select this whole thing, animate, animation. So this is where I showed you the chart, for instance. I'll just choose wipe, which is in this case now going from the bottom top. So I'll go to Effect Options, go from the top, and one by one. So now if I was going to run this, this is what it would look like. And I'm just using click or arrow to move to the next one. It's that easy. So smart art, how can you use this to leverage and create more appealing, more effective graphics? Here's another example. I just simply have these bullets. Remember phrases, not sentences. Now I'm going to click into this text, and in the Home tab, here is an option, so I don't have to retype it, convert to smart art graphic. And from this, then I could hover over and just see what are some options here. Okay. So let's just say that this is the one that I wanted to pick. So now I have something that's more visual and presents my information in maybe a more appealing way. Explore smart art. Also explore, as I mentioned earlier, under Insert and Pictures, stock images, because these are royalty-free. They're part of working with Microsoft 365, and you can come in then and pick different images that you can add to your charts, to your slides. You can see that new ones are added. There are icons that are available as well, and they're even broken out by different industries. So those are some things to explore as you want to look at adding more visual appeal. That is, how can we create more effective presentations with all the built-in tools? And we're going to explore that more in next month as well. Okay. Hopefully you already have some takeaways to create more compelling presentations. The third part of building out your presentations is practice. And so with practice, this is where you run your presentation, and ideally you do it within whatever that environment is. So if it's virtual, it could be on the screen. You might want to have some, have someone that come in to also be part of that virtual meeting, or you might be in a conference room and try it there with the equipment, because that will also help you to see where you might have some gaps or some things to fix. But evaluate your content from the so what, who cares, why is this important? Because that's what your audience is going to ask you. That is, why are they telling me this? Frankly, is even if you are extremely proud of your organization's history, that probably isn't something that will be important for people that you are wanting to recruit as members, or that you want as customers, or for your employees. And so be careful about as well how much of that background information you provide that may not be relevant to your goal, your message. It's also important to try some of the equipment, to use a remote control. That will help you to get away from your laptop so that you're simply not standing right at your laptop to move forward, because then we run into these kinds of problems. That is, you want to make sure that you get away from the AV moat, that you're not standing in front of the projector, that you have a space to be able to move, you have a way to interact with your audience. That is if it's an in-person presentation. And once again, test those slides, just make sure that they're readable from the back of the room, and that you are not trying to communicate too much information all at once. So those are certainly some of the things that you also will help you from that practice side of that. It's also a good way for you just to be able to practice getting more comfortable delivering that content. Because this is where we can sometimes say, oh, I have to go back and revise my plan. Maybe I forgot an important topic, or I need to reorder those slides. So build in that time for practice, because that will definitely help you when it comes time to present. For presenting, here, this is then, how can you elevate your comfort as a presenter, your success as a presenter? And we're going to assume now that you have created a great plan, you've implemented it by preparing effective, more visual slides, by taking advantage of some of these built-in tools. You practiced it. So what are some of the things that you would be part of your practice and then your final presentation? Having a remote control is definitely something that will help you to be able to then navigate and move within the room. Knowing some effective keyboard shortcuts, I'll share these with you in just a moment. If you have speaker notes, then this will help with your nerves. It will help you to know what's coming up, because you can print that out where there's a slide and then the notes below. And so we remove so much of that detailed content from the slides themselves and can move it into your speaker notes. It may be helpful for you to have a printed out numbered handout. That way you can move ahead. It's like, oh, I don't have enough time. And it's good to have a clock, by the way. So not just your watch, because then people will notice that you're checking your watch or your phone. So something that will tell you how much time you have left, so that this way we can navigate or jump to particular slides. In PowerPoint, we can also hide slides. That means that you can hide a slide if, for instance, it's something that you might have as backup material, more detail, but that you can get back to if someone asks you, like, well, where did those numbers come from 2019? And if you suspect that that might be something that's going to be requested, you would have that available, but you wouldn't need to include that in the primary part of your presentation. And then there is also a presenter view. Now, this is a good thing to test out in the practice, because the presenter view is something that it's nice if it's available to you, or if you can make it work with the projector. What that means is that you will see what's coming up as a slide. The audience just sees the presentation. And so with that, then the presenter view, you will be able to see your speaker notes. You would be able to see more about your presentation. It's kind of your control center for that. So the presenter view is something to practice, because it may not be doable, or it may not work depending upon your setup, but it is a great feature when it's possible in terms of working with that. So let's look at some other tools that are available to you. And these are some presentation shortcuts. And please continue to share your questions with that. So here I have a slide. I'm going to hit the F5 function key to run it from the beginning. And notice Shift F5 could run the slideshow from the current slide. If you want to get a list of keyboard shortcuts, hit your F1 function key. Now know that your audience will see this as well, but this can be a handy resource for you. And I can simply not hit my enter. There we go. I'll go ahead and OK to move away from that. But that is also another way for me to get some keyboard shortcuts so I can more smoothly work through this. Now, a lot of the images you see here are coming from those stock images. And so that can be a really helpful piece as well. Right click for a shortcut menu. Once again, your audience will see this, but if I right click here are all sorts of different things I can do. So we don't have to escape out of our presentation. Instead, you can, for instance, look to see, oh, I want to go to the next slide. I want to go to the previous one. What are my options? So that is another way for you to see some of those shortcuts. I mentioned before that you can use the slide number and then enter to jump to a slide. And so if you have that printed out handout, that becomes really useful. And that's just something that you can go to print, and what you're printing is you're going to choose one of the handout layouts. For instance, whether it's, you know, I have one right here. And so this is 9 slides, 4 slides, 6 slides, and you can have the slide numbers there. Or you can create just a handwritten cheat sheet if that's easier for you. But if I wanted to be able to get back to a particular slide here, I'm just going to type a 2, and that gets takes me to this slide. I'll type 4 on my keyboard and hit enter to go back. That is an easy way to be able to move back and forth, especially as you're watching the time and the availability. What if you don't know a slide number? What if you don't have that handout? Well, press Control S. Now your audience will see this, but here again, it's better than escaping out and trying to hunt around for it. And maybe I'll go ahead and go to this last slide. I'll simply click on it and choose Go To. So that was a quick way for me to move. Control S, and we'll go back to that slide. Some other shortcuts. The home key takes me to the first slide. The end key takes me to the last one. If you're in an in-person presentation, or could even be in virtual, that is, and the topic has moved away from what you have on the screen, one of the options for you is to type a letter B and the screen goes black. You can do a W, screen goes white. Now, sometimes it might be better even to move to another slide that just has like your logo or something like that on it, because sometimes this can be unnerving. That white is a little hard on the eyes, but it's good to know that you do have that as an option for you. And if you want to make some notations on a slide, Control P is a way for you to enable the pen. And so now my mouse has become a pen. I could right click with my shortcut menu, and I could actually change then my ink color. And notice I have other options here, which I'll share with you in just a moment. So this might be to highlight something within a chart, something within a simple spreadsheet. Now, if I wanted to, for instance, just erase a part of this, I could do Control E, which is going to bring up the eraser, and I'll just select this one, for instance, or the letter E to erase all. Now, right now I'm in the eraser mode. I'm going to press Control E to turn that off. Another option is Control I for the highlighter. And so now my mouse has actually become a highlighter. That's another tool for you. Press it again and it turns it off. And if you want to highlight in a different way, Control L is a laser. Now we want to move this very slowly because this is not a good practice. So slowly, if you want to highlight certain elements, it is not marking up the screen, it is just highlighting certain elements on the screen. And once again, Control L would turn that off. I'm just also can use my arrows left and right to go forward and back, or the letter N for next or P for previous. I can use my mouse as well. Now, if I have my mouse on the screen and it's bumping around, or I don't want it to be visible, I can do Control H, which hides it, and Control A or Control U, which will unhide it or switch back to an arrow. So those are other things that will help you to deliver your presentations from a more professional perspective. We even have options to zoom in and zoom out. So if I hit my plus key, and this is assuming this is not when I'm just viewing it in the normal view, for instance, this is when I'm in the presentation mode, slideshow mode, and I'm hitting my plus here. Now notice my mouse has become a hand, and I can actually then kind of change this so that I can move to a particular part there. So we don't want to have extremely detailed slide content, but there might be something like a map or something that would, where you might want to zoom in or have that ability to it. Or even better, create a slide with that map and then create another slide where you have zoomed in so that you could do that as a supporting slide. Now I could also zoom out with the minus. And if I hit that another time, I now get back to my slide sorter view or slide selector view. So this is what we saw earlier. And then finally, when we're on our last slide, at any time we can escape to end the slideshow. And I have some annotations. I'm going to discard those, even though those were lovely. But those are some helpful keyboard shortcuts for delivering, presenting your PowerPoint presentations. And that's our look at creating presentation success by avoiding the pitfalls of PowerPoint. We offer these K-Squared Technologies webinars once a month on the second Tuesday of the month. Coming up, we're going to continue our exploration of PowerPoint. And in that case, we are going to, I will share with you a lot of the built-in tools, artificial intelligence tools, to be able to quickly create more interactive, compelling visuals. What are some of the built-in ways that we can actually get more effective, more appealing, more interesting presentations from PowerPoint? Also, you'll see some tools for helping to further organize and plan out your presentations. And then in September, we'll shift to Microsoft Excel, how you can analyze your data with Power Pivot. We continue our program throughout the year and look for our emails and our announcements for upcoming topics. So I hope you will join us for this training series. And when we finish up in a few minutes, you'll see a survey pop up on the screen. Please do share, use this as an opportunity to share the topics that you'd like to see in the future. Thanks for joining us today. How can we help you to be more productive? Please reach out to us for IT services and consulting to support you with Microsoft Technologies. We look forward to working with you. Thanks so much for joining us.